Thanks for starting your week with us. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Moon Jae-in in Seoul. Coming up on today's edition of Business Daily. Korea's new antitrust chief plans to meet with top executives of family-run conglomerates to urge them to reform and work towards greater transparency. The Moon Jae-in government introduces a number of measures to tighten lending rules amid rising home prices here in Seoul and the country's snowballing household debt. These stories and more coming right up. Korea's antitrust watchdog has been outlining its plan to reform the country's large family-run business conglomerates known as chaebol to root out funneling of lucrative contracts to their own companies and encourage better corporate governance. Here's our Kim Ji-yeon with more.
The new chairman of the Fair Trade Commission, Kim Sang-jo, outlined the agency's policy-focused standards and guidelines and said it will establish short, mid, and long-term goals based upon three criteria: the gravity of the issue, urgency, and whether the case would require legislative approval. Kim says the antitrust watchdog will first seek public consensus on the matter, which means it may take a case-by-case approach to look into suspected unfair business practices by chaebols. It says it's currently examining some 45 chaebol-related cases to determine which to focus on first. He said the commission will actively seek cooperation with related ministries, which may take some time since some cabinet positions still haven't been filled. The Fair Trade Commission is also expected to undergo a reshuffle. Details on that will be announced by the end of July. The FTC chief said he will meet with the representatives of the top four conglomerates, namely Samsung, Hyundai-Motor, SK, and LG Group, to open a channel of communication, but added this does not mean that it will focus solely on them. He said regardless of their size, companies will be punished for unfair business practices and also emphasized the need to look into the relationship between chaebols and their subcontractors. Kim Ji-yeon, Business Daily.
Property prices in Korea have gone up in recent years, especially since regulations on housing loans were loosened in 2014. And to deal with the overheating property market, the government has rolled out new countermeasures. Oh Soo-young reports.
The Korean government is cracking down on debt-filled property bubbles seen in some areas of the country. The government announced a new set of measures on Monday, targeting a total of 40 hotspots, which include districts in Seoul, Gyeonggi-do province, and the cities of Sejong and Busan. To reduce speculation, property owners and redevelopers in those areas will face tougher procedures in reselling and buying homes. Also, two major loan regulations have been tightened up in the designated areas. The loan-to-value ratio, which allowed up to 70% of a property's value to be financed through loans, will be lowered to 60%, and 50% for the debt-to-income ratio. However, the previous rates will be maintained for low-income households and actual home buyers. The government has also decided to enforce the debt-to-income ratio on collective mortgages, which were granted without income screening as they're brokered en masse through construction companies selling off new properties. But will this be enough to cool down the overheating?
The caps on redevelopment and collective loans could lower investment from big-time property dealers, but inflated prices are unlikely to drop significantly as a result of the new policies, which are designed to curb excessive speculation.
Since mortgage rates were loosened in 2014, apartment prices and lump sum deposit rates have soared by more than 20% and over 50% respectively. Soaring property prices were reinforced by easy loans, which not only fueled real estate speculation, but also saddled numerous families with debt, in exchange for access to homes that they couldn't have otherwise afforded in areas like Gangnam and this district of Bundang. The annual growth of household debt has hit double digits since 2014, hitting over $1 trillion. Experts say to effectively rein in the housing market and household debt, the government must introduce a more efficient mortgage screening system, such as a debt service ratio, as well as increase monitoring of non-bank institutions that issue loans with high interest rates. Oh Soo-young, Business Daily.
Korea's producer prices fell for the third straight month in May on sliding global oil prices and raw material costs. According to preliminary data released by the central bank on Monday, the producer price index, a barometer of future consumer inflation, reached 102.26, down 0.2% from April. Prices of agricultural products rose slightly, with the price of chicken jumping by double digits on month due to the avian influenza outbreak. Electricity, gas, and water prices also went up, but prices of industrial products fell by 0.5%, driving down overall prices. The Korean equity market rebounded from last week's weak performance as the technology sector led the rally on the Kospi market. For more on the overall stock market performance and upcoming market events, our markets contributor Choi Jin-suk joins us in the studio today. So good to see you.
Great to be here.
All right, so how did the Korean stock market close on the first day of the week?
Both the Kospi and the Kosdaq market started the week with a strong footing. The Kospi rose by 0.38% to close at 2370.9, while the Kosdaq followed with a 0.7% uptick to close at 675. The Kospi market started the session off with a slight downtick due to stock selling by foreign investors. However, the market soon erased early losses to stay in positive territory as foreigners joined institutions in buying shares. By sector, technology on the Kospi surged by almost 2% during the session, with Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, the largest and the second largest stock by market cap, both rising sharply. Last week, technology shares on the U.S. S&P 500 plummeted by more than 1% again. However, experts say investors think tech stocks in Korea are still undervalued compared to their earnings. On the Kosdaq, biotechnology led the way in today's rally.
Now, today's rebound seems to suggest that fundamentals of the Korean market are still strong despite sluggish performance in recent days.
That's right, and that confidence has been proven by numbers. Korea Exchange said today that Korea's two stock indexes, the Kospi and the Kosdaq, have climbed one spot since the end of last year to 14th place as of May of this year, thanks to strong foreign buying as well as rising expectations for the new Moon administration. The combined market cap for the Kospi and the Kosdaq came to $1.55 trillion, accounting for 2.2% of global market cap and a rise of 20.8% from the end of 2016. Only two stock exchanges in India grew faster at around 25%.
Now, the U.S. Federal Reserve's more hawkish than expected stance during its June FOMC meeting has been spooking investor sentiment in global equity markets. So what are some of the related events lined up for this week?
As we are heading towards summer holidays, there aren't many economic indicators reported this week. Instead, a lot of Fed officials will deliver speeches. The list includes New York Fed President William Dudley on Monday local time, Fed Vice Chair Stanley Fischer, Boston Fed President Eric Rosengren, and Dallas Fed President Robert Kaplan on Tuesday, and Fed Governor Jerome Powell and St. Louis Fed President James Bullard on Friday. Despite the fact that recently reported economic indicators have been weak, the Fed signaled it will push forward with its tightening path. Therefore, investors are eager to get more hints from Fed officials when it comes to future interest rate hikes as well as a potential reduction of the Fed's balance sheet.
Now, despite today's rebound, market participants are still concerned that investors will be in profit-taking mode in the near term. So what are the main reasons?
Right. One of the major reasons is that this week's market events are more likely to serve as negative catalysts in the near term. After the U.S. Federal Reserve raised interest rates, investors here at home worry about the inclusion of China's A shares in the MSCI Emerging Market Index the most. Although experts think the issue will have a limited impact on the Korean market, foreigners might start taking profits in the market in the short term due to fears of a potential impact, and that might negatively affect the overall sentiment. Secondly, slower export growth has been raising concerns over weak Q2 earnings among companies in sectors including materials and intermediate goods. This is why investors are expected to pay a lot of attention to this week's trade data as well.
Now, falling oil prices might be a factor dragging down corporate earnings, right?
Right. West Texas Intermediate, or WTI, prices plummeted again by 2.4% last week. Despite the efforts by OPEC and non-OPEC oil producers to reduce production, investors in commodity markets still have concerns over America's overproduction. As we said, falling oil prices can be a factor negatively affecting earnings of companies in the energy sector. In this sense, experts advise investors to keep a close eye on this week's oil inventory data.
And we'll also keep our eyes close on that. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Korea's first nuclear reactor was turned off for good on Monday, and President Moon Jae-in attended a ceremony to celebrate the reactor's retirement, both as a symbol of how far Korea has come and the nuclear energy-free future he envisions. Our Hwang Ho-jun has more.
It was built in 1977, and 40 years later,
2017년 6월 19일 0시 대한민국은 국내 최초의 고리원전 1호기를 영구정지했습니다.
President Moon attended a ceremony Monday morning to proclaim Korea's first commercial nuclear reactor's retirement at the Kori nuclear power plant in Busan. He said that the Kori-1 reactor has been the symbol of Korea's industrialization and enabled the nation to meet its increasing energy demands. But also, according to the president, the permanent shutdown of the Kori-1 reactor is the first step toward a nuclear-free country, and in his own words, the turning point toward a safer Korea.
원전 정책도 전면적으로 재검토하겠습니다. 원전 중심의 발전 정책을 폐기하고 탈핵 시대로 가겠습니다. 준비 중인 신규 원전 건설 계획은 전면 백지화하겠습니다.
While the decision to shut down the Kori-1 was made long before President Moon took office, the president himself has pledged to close down all nuclear power plants on Korean soil. Nuclear safety re-emerged as a major issue for the public after the nuclear disaster in Fukushima, Japan in 2011 and the 5.8 magnitude earthquake that struck the Korean city of Gyeongju last year, an area not far from a number of nuclear plants. President Moon pledged that his administration will proactively cultivate green and sustainable energy like solar and offshore wind power and establish an energy ecosystem suitable for the fourth industrial revolution. He also said the shutdown of Kori-1 can be seen as another opportunity for Korea, since disassembling a nuclear reactor is not only a matter of time, but also incredible skill. According to the president, Korea will gain these skills by dismantling Kori-1 and will then be able to help other countries when similar situations arise, especially amid growing movements to denuclearize. Hwang Ho-jun, Business Daily.
And President Moon Jae-in will embark on a 4-day visit to the U.S. next week, which will include a summit meeting with his American counterpart, President Donald Trump. As their agenda is worked out, attention is on the business delegation that will join him at a time when the Korea-U.S. FTA looks to be on shaky grounds. Our Lee Ju-young has the details.
Some 100 companies of various sizes are being considered to accompany President Moon Jae-in on his first overseas mission to the United States. Some 50 are expected to make the cut. Different in this round of vetting is that the delegation's formation will be led by a civilian organization with little to no involvement from the Trade Ministry. The Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry will review the applicants and their plans for investment in the U.S. in light of U.S. President Donald Trump's recent comments that he wants to see the KORES FTA re-examined, if not scrapped altogether, calling it unacceptable and horrible.
At a time of U.S. protectionism, this is an opportunity for Korean firms to have their voices heard before the Korea-U.S. FTA is renegotiated.
The Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry is expected to hold a review board meeting early this week before finalizing the roster of business delegates that will be sent to the presidential office of Cheongade for final approval. With the Federation of Korean Industries taking a minor role this time following its involvement in the Choi Soon-sil abuse of power scandal, more SMEs are expected to make up the economic mission. Among heads of large conglomerates, LG Electronics Vice Chairman Koo Bon-jun and SK Group Chairman Choi Tae-won have expressed interest in joining, as has FKI and GS Group Chairman Heo Chang-soo. Decisions are forthcoming from the likes of Hyundai Motor Group and Samsung Group. President Moon's trip comes less than 2 months into his young government, and at a time when heads of top players like Samsung and Lotte Groups remain under investigation. His conversations with President Trump could address THAAD and North Korea's missile programs, in addition to the future of the Korea-U.S. FTA. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
Exports in Japan rose at the fastest pace in over 2 years last month, signaling stronger growth may be on the horizon for the world's third largest economy. Although the near 15% increase failed to meet the 16.1% median estimate, it was still the biggest rise since January of 2015. Economists noted that the increase was partially due to low exports a year ago, following an earthquake in Kumamoto that temporarily halted production of cars and auto parts. But as there are signs of expansion in overseas markets, Japan's exports are expected to continue to rise. With total export volume up 7.5% on year, increased factory output, and a tightening labor market, Japan's economy looks poised to extend its recent growth. China has been increasing its economic influence throughout Asia, with Kyrgyzstan benefiting in recent years. And our Elliot Kim has more on how China has helped improve their economy in recent years.
Like many former Soviet Union states, Kyrgyzstan is impoverished. Despite already struggling, its economy fell into a financial crisis following Russia's annexation of Crimea in March 2014. The local currency fell significantly, losing nearly half its value against the US dollar, consequently multiplying the national debt. 2016 brought another low point as the economy felt the effects of Russia's recession and gold output slumped. The country turned to China to help rejuvenate its economy.
In the beginning of the 90s, turnover of commodities between our countries was around 100 to 200 million US dollars. But now the annual turnover has reached 1.5 billion. It means that year after year, relations are getting better.
From Chinese-made goods to Beijing loans for highways and factories, China's impact on Kyrgyzstan is as readily apparent as ever. Following the country's request that China relocate plants and factories to the nation, the economy has improved. One of the largest improvements is the Zongda oil refinery plant in Kara-Balta. Completed in 2014, the plant currently processes 300,000 tons of crude oil a year. Processing is expected to increase to 600,000 tons in 2017, much closer to the plant's 800,000-ton capacity. Small-scale retailers have also enjoyed a rebound since turning to Chinese-made goods, which often come at cheaper prices. Vendors note how despite receiving shipments every 10 to 12 days, the goods sell out within a couple of days. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
More than a month has passed since the government launched a project to make payments more convenient by getting rid of coins. Now, how do sellers and customers feel about the changes? Our Ian Shin takes a look at Korea's first steps toward a cashless society.
This convenience store is always packed, with students stopping by to grab some snacks and a quick coffee before class. After paying cash at the checkout, instead of receiving change, some of the young customers just hand over a transit card. A deposit is then made onto the plastic.
Having to carry pennies is inconvenient since there's no coin pocket in my wallet, plus it makes noise.
I find this hassle-free. I'd recommend this method of transaction to my friends.
Starting mid-April, shoppers have been putting change from their purchases onto prepaid cards or directly into their bank account. Some of the nation's biggest chain stores and selected supermarkets are taking part in this pilot project introduced by the central bank.
We expect the project to alleviate the physical difficulties of coin usage and save the costs of managing pennies for companies. It'll also help reduce the cost of some $54 million that's used for producing coins every year.
There's been a general shift away from using coins across different businesses. Carrying a backup change to a public laundry service may be a thing of the past, as a single plastic card is all it takes for a payment at this laundromat.
Customers find it easier to use the card than having to pay with coins and carry leftover change. About 60% of them are on board with this now.
On the surface, it may seem the push to get rid of pennies is long overdue.
However, it's a different story at places like traditional markets and street stalls. Even here in the capital's Seoul, many of these merchants still prefer cash exchange, as do their customers. And they seem reluctant to the idea of going coinless for now.
Taking additional steps to install a new machine aside, small chit-chat between vendors and their regulars during cash exchange is something that'll be missed.
We accept plastic but prefer cash exchange. There's something not so cordial about card payment. Plus, no one likes credit card fees.
I don't think this new method is for us merchants over 50. We are not very confident with handling machines.
On top of that, there are questions as to whether the method is secure. A solid support structure is needed to avoid a temporary drop in transactions.
For such self-employed business owners and corner shops, a transaction method that promises convenience and security is needed. For instance, QR codes could be the solution. And education programs and campaigns are also called for those who are intimidated by the electronic way of paying.
If the system meets expectations, the nation will move away from pennies, which cost more to produce than their actual worth anyway. A decade-old campaign encouraging people to find all the sleeping coins at home and bring them to the nearest bank has revitalized the nation's economy, saving over $25 million every year. Some market experts project that scrapping not just coins but hard cash altogether could further tackle low growth and inflation. But such a move may be a bit far-fetched for the nation to ponder right now.
Internet banking requires internet access, and the new technology requires additional learning. Lower-class folks could struggle with these. Cash transactions are also easier for international visitors, and the anonymity of cash usage is valued. On one hand, going cash-free could lead to a transparent society, but on the flip side, it could take away one's privacy.
Just a little over a month in since coming into effect, the pilot project is doing what's meant to do, weighing pros against cons of going cash-free in the long run. And the first step towards that is to make sure that there are no bumps along the road, so that penniless exchanges can happen smoothly across the nation. 이은신, Business Daily.
And that brings us to the end. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more business news that matters to you. Until then, goodbye.